Hey everyone, welcome back to the MHP Show podcast. I'm your host, Derek Vickers. And here on the MHP Show, we talk about anything and everything that has to do with mobile home parks, operations, crazy stories, talk about things real estate, and really dive into this asset class and anything else. And you just never know what we're going to get into on this show. So today I have another guest. I have Mr. Craig Snyder with it's RYZ Communities, correct?
RYZE, Rise Communities.
Got it. Rise Communities.
Yeah.
Welcome, Craig. I know we've talked like 100 times on the phone, and I'm like, man, we should.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm like, man, we should just hit record on some of these conversations that we have because we always have good conversations. So glad to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we've experienced a lot of the same things, just different parts of the country.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So what do you guys, so tell us about Rise Communities. Like, what do you guys buy in? What have you bought in the past? And just tell us about it.
Yeah. So we're strictly value add buyers. So we typically buy the mobile home parks that are a little less desirable. And then we have a team that goes in, cleans it up, and basically tries to bring it up to market value. And then we're typically buying hold investors because we're not really a syndicator. So this way, at least it gives us a value add opportunity where we can increase rents, provide affordable housing for people. We also have RV parks as well. And we're looking to expand in both of those asset classes as we keep growing.
Nice. Yeah, I know. And that's kind of the same as what we bought. I know you and I have talked a bunch of times about some of the interesting value add stories, and we'll definitely get into some of that. But what are you guys seeing out there in the market? The deals that you were buying in the last year or two, are you seeing those available out there now?
No, we're seeing a lot of, I'll say, newbies coming into the market. I probably get a call once a week for people that want me to invest in their syndication. And I ask them, what's their history and what's their experience in the asset, and it's very shallow, to say the least. So it makes us a little nervous. That gets a little frothy. So we do see people paying a lot of money. We've had offers on our properties that you sit there and are somewhat dumbfounded. And we kind of want to sell it at those numbers, but then you got to find something to 1031 into. So that's the catch. It's like you kind of want to take advantage of some people who are trying to break into the industry. But then on the other side, it's harder to purchase assets that make some sense because there's so many people out there with a lot of money that are able to purchase these properties or purchasing the properties, without the necessary knowledge to run them. And we do see a lot of people with money on the sidelines. We talk to a lot of people who have been in this industry and the multifamily industry, a lot longer than I've been. Very wealthy, successful people, and they're sitting on their hands, for another, some are telling us 18 to 24 months to wait and see what's going to happen.
Yeah. Wow. And that's interesting. And so you're getting calls with people to invest in their syndicate. You got people cold calling you for that?
Well, the people that know us, from the past, people who are saying, hey, you guys are investing, we're out of state investors, right? So they're like, oh, you guys are out of state. We're getting involved in out of state investing. I see this, mobile home park in, I'll use Ohio as an example. And, there's so much value add. The OM says X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, yeah, you got to do your own due diligence. But they're raising money because everyone hears that this asset class is, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And, running it is a different animal than even an apartment building, as you know.
Yeah. And so you're getting there's, 100 vacant lots and there's so much value add. We're just going to bring on new homes. Like it's so freaking easy. That drives me nuts.
I wish it was
anything.
I wish it was. And I tell people, I say, typically if a deal's being advertised online, it's already been offered to, a lot of people already.
Yeah, for sure. And they've passed on it. And, I wanted to touch on, so like when you, when did you buy your first mobile home park?
18, maybe 2018, somewhere around then, maybe 17. But it took us 2 years to find the first mobile home park.
Oh, wow.
Before we actually first saw one. Actually, it took us 2 years from finding this one to close on it. And that's been our typical MO. Is it's a 2-year process to typically purchase most of our assets from the first time we buy them. A lot of the sellers end up going through a lot of headache where they'll sell a property or they think they sold it to someone who's not educated. They don't realize you can't get financing like an apartment building. So then they don't have the capital to put into the property. And we always stay in touch. And one of our favorite stories was one guy that we spoke with. We had a deal, and really nice guy. And he called me up, and I was talking to him for months. He goes, "I need your opinion." I said, "What is it?" He goes, "This guy told me he's going to give me 300,000 more than you." I said, "I would take it if I was you, but you got to make sure it's legit." So signed the paperwork, and then I had a wholesaler sending it to me to buy it, and I forwarded it to him. And he cannot believe the headaches it was causing because they had random people walking the property, 10 o'clock at night. He's getting phone calls. And he got out of the deal because they couldn't get the financing, and he just sold it to us. But, that's what happens a lot of times.
Yeah, for sure. And we were on site talking to a seller yesterday, and he's like, I got 3 other offers higher than your offer. Sales tactic on them, by the way. And I'm like, Just take it, man. You should take that offer because I'm not moving. So take it. Right.
And they'll come back to you when the other offer isn't real.
Yeah.
That's what happens all the time. I mean, we're working on another park. It's been going on 2.5 years. We had contracts. And then one of the limited partners in the deal said, "Oh, we can't sell it. There's still things that can be done." There's nothing that can be done. They overpaid for the property substantially many years ago, and nothing's changed. But you know what? Maybe they'll change their tune in 4, 5, 6 months. But you can't get aggravated. You just got to go with it. And it's nothing personal. It's just business. We'll find another one. We'll look for another one. There'll be another opportunity. So you just got to keep looking and keeping positive because it could be very hard sometimes.
Yeah. It gets, it can get frustrating, but luckily my stint in the insurance business with, grinding out deals for, 9 years gave me that, that even keel persistence that you need, especially in these last, 18 months here to kind of not go crazy.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good background to have.
Yeah, for sure. So what I was talking, so you got your first park, a few years back. What did you learn? Because you mentioned that you've got a bunch, you've talked to some people that are new in the business, and they're not, what I always see is that they're underestimating the operational headaches. Like, oh, I'm just going to pay someone, $20 a month, and I'll give them, $10 off their lot rent to manage the property. And it's a value add deal. So we know what's involved in that. But what did you learn on that first deal that kind of, maybe not necessarily shocked you, but it was different than what you had initially thought about the asset class?
Say the construction of the homes was kind of surprising. We're like, because we've renovated multiple, multifamily for years. We had our own team up in New York for years, our own crew, our own contracting license. We're like, how hard could these things be just to renovate and put it back on the market? And then you start realizing, well, a 1960s trailer versus a 2010 manufactured home, it's a little bit of a difference. You can't just put a roof on a 60s, 70s trailer, put tile in or, heavy weight because they can't handle that weight. So that we've experienced before. Setting the homes, sometimes people don't realize because, especially in Florida with the ground being a little softer than other parts, if it's not done right, those homes shift. And that's not really looked highly upon by the tenants when they wake up in the morning and their home is half off. So that was a few things. Certain tenant bases don't want to pay for city water, so they disconnect the water and the sewer connection, we learned. And then all of a sudden you're on site, you're like, why is that dropping out of the trailer like that? We thought it was broken. We fixed it. And then a week later, it's the same scenario. And,
oh my gosh. Never heard that before.
That was an interesting story to hear. But I think the more you do it, when I first got into real estate from accounting, one guy I spoke with many times, he's got 95 multifamily properties. And he said you could read books and follow all you want, but until you buy it and live it, that's when you actually learn what you're doing on a daily basis. Different personalities, different people. Someone in Jacksonville, Florida, who's a tenant, just communicating with them versus someone who's in New York is just a different person and different way to communicate with them. So that's another thing that we learned with our first mobile home park is just the communication of it. I will say on the other side, a lot of people don't understand that the mobile home park is, it's a really great asset class for people who need affordable housing and that want to live in an apartment. So we didn't even think of it that way in our first one, but that was, a positive that we learned.
Yeah, that's great, man. And it's like, it's funny you mentioned, I've never heard of anybody undoing the sewer and water themselves.
Yes.
But, it's funny you mentioned something about setting the trailer. I thought about something. So we brought in a home in our first park. I brought it in. And, I found like the cheapest mover, a cowboy, a trailer dog, and he, came in and set up the trailer. So like 2 weeks later, we pull in, and this girl was drunk driving into the park. She hits the hitch, trailer moves and basically falls off the cinder blocks. And because it wasn't done right, it wasn't tied down, he did a terrible job. And, needless to say, they weren't very happy about it. So we ended up having to pay to get it done right. And it's just, things that you learn in the beginning, you're trying to do things cheap, but, that's not always the best way to do it at all.
Not at all. Because when the next guy comes in and sees you're trying to be cheap, they're going to be like, well, there's a little extra now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So you guys are buying. So what is your mix between multifamily properties and mobile home parks? Like what's your portfolio's mix, I guess, from a percentage perspective?
So we have, it's 70% mobile and RV, and then 30% is multifamily. We still have some multifamily up in New York that it's just easier to leave rented for the time being. But other than that, it's mainly mobile home. Well, one of the mobile home parks is a larger RV park.
Yeah.
That was stumbled upon, but we're looking for, just to keep expanding in areas that grow.
Yeah. Cool. And in the RV park that you have, is that like a long-term RV park or is it transient or what kind of deal is that?
It's mixed. You have a little bit of both. You have some people that do stay long-term and some people that don't,
Yeah. And the reason why I ask, because I actually have first full RV park actually under contract, and it's more of like a long-term RV park. So I'm just, learning as I'm going through due diligence, going through the assets, a little bit different. It's virtually the same, but I love RV parks. And I think we'll, end up buying more of them because the cap rates seem more favorable going in than what we're seeing on parks right now. Because I'm still getting sent stuff. It's like, all right, how is this even possible to make work?
We get those every day as well. Probably the same mailing list.
Probably.
Yeah. One of my concerns with RV parks is they're easier to create. So I think that we're very careful on when we do an RV park is we probably got 4 or 5 RV parks in the same western part of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And he just built it and he's trying to sell it. And this guy just built it trying to sell it. So I try to look to see, is there any way to have any long-term tenants there? And if it's a more transient and more of a desolate area, it becomes a little more concerning because then why can't someone else who buys it and could build it for, 50 cents on the dollar, they could undercut everybody else and they put you and whoever spent a little too much out of business.
Yeah. I like the long-term aspect. The transient, that really does not tickle my fancy at all. I like the long-term aspect because it generally operates like a mobile home park. Like this one that we're looking at, it's direct build electric. So it's not, you don't have this crazy electric expense. So I like that. And again, just to reiterate, I love that because it just operates like a standard mobile home park.
Yeah. And with the RV parks, it's very easy to use technology to assist in filling the lots and paying and all those items for the residents.
Yeah. So what did I'm skipping around a little bit here, but what did you do before? I know you mentioned accounting. So you were an accountant before. Did you do anything else entrepreneurial before you got into this crazy business?
So yeah, I have an accounting degree. I spent a couple of years doing forensic auditing. I was actually on the World Trade Center cleanup audit after 9/11. So that was definitely an experience. Um, Post to that, I didn't really like accounting, so I got into real estate appraisal. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to go buy some foreclosures at the steps in Queens, New York. But that was a very difficult task to accomplish. But pretty much then I started working in property management. And then I started saying, hey, I'm going to flip houses. I didn't know anything. And I started doing, 10 houses at a time. We did about 30 a year, and we had our own crew. And we're like, wow, this is tough because it's constantly one on, one off. The tax liability is substantial compared to, let's say, an apartment building. And, the barrier to entry is very simple to flip a home. So we ended up saying, okay, let's just go buy and hold. So we started buying dilapidated apartment buildings, multifamily, and then renovating and renting them. And then we ended up selling most of them in a 1031 to start buying the mobile home parks.
Wow. Wow. So you were 30 houses. Like I can't imagine like the management aspect of that with all these crazy I know how these contractors are, dude. I mean, and you're managing them on 30 projects.
Well, that's why we did our own in-house crew.
Yeah.
That's the only way to really make it somewhat viable. It's still very hard, even though you have one of our guys would be the head contractor and he'd oversee the work, but it's just a constant flow of homes coming on, homes coming off. And then, you don't realize it, but the taxes that you're paying on the profit of those flips is something that a lot of people I still talk to today that want to flip a house. And like, well, if you think you're going to make, 50, 60, 70,000, you got to make sure you're understanding the tax liability that you're going to have at the end of the year. That's going to offset what profit you may have on paper.
Yeah, because you're going to be paying 30 to 50%, right?
Especially if you're in a state that has state income tax, or if you're in New York, you have state, and if you're a city resident, you have state, city, and federal tax.
Yeah,
so it does go up pretty high.
So you live in New York, right?
I do live in New York. Yep, I'm on Long Island.
Okay. Yeah, so they're getting you up there, probably closer to 50% up there.
They like collecting their money.
They do.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to get you down in Florida, man. I know you own a bunch of assets in Florida. You probably I'm surprised you haven't made the jump yet.
That's the long-term plan. We have 2 young kids, so once they're through school, that will be one of the things that my wife and I will be looking at.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So after you did all that, that's when you started buying multifamily, and then you got into, mobile home parks. How did you find, did you just stumble upon a mobile home park deal, or was it just?
So we were originally going to start doing some maybe, larger multifamily. And I spoke with the same guy who owned 95 properties, and he's got all of them are in 5 boroughs. And he's nervous about what was going on as far as the rent regulations they have and the rent control and rent stabilization, and just a lack of common sense. So we said, okay, we can't really invest in New York, so let's start investing in other spots. And then, the biggest need has always been affordable housing. It's still going to be a need going forward. And they're like, okay, what's the most affordable asset class? And that's when we started looking at these mobile homes. And if someone could come up with, a little down payment, or they're handy, they could own something and pay $300 to $600 in lot rent a month. You could live a pretty good life versus, I'll say similar person on Long Island, for a 3-bedroom, in an average area at best, it's $3,500 for a house. So wow. It's much, much more. Yeah. We also noticed some of our tenant base up here was relocating out for the same reason. They went to the Carolinas, and they said, look, I could live a better life. So that was like, sooner or later, you got knocked on the side of the head enough, you realize what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see in the next 10 years, like if the migration continues to happen. Because you're right, someone living in New York, or California or somewhere, like the cost of living is massive. But the interesting thing is that the people are coming down here to Florida and driving up the cost of living here. Like, go to Miami, dude. Like, I was in Miami for a conference, and I'm just going around like whatever. I'm like, I do not know how someone that's actually working in this hotel even pay, like how they even live down here. On a normal, like you gotta have three jobs, or you're splitting your rent with three people.
Well, that's what it's like on Long Island. So some of the units we have, you may have even some of the houses that sell here, you have what's called multi-generational living. So you'll have two or three generations. You'll have, let's say, the grandparents, and sometimes you'll have the two kids with their families living in one house.
Wow.
Because they get the senior star exemption for taxes, and just things are so expensive. So, when I talk to some people, say Northeast Florida, they're like, "Oh, it's so expensive." I'm like, "Yeah, it's not that expensive when you factor in that everything is going up, the cost." And then in New York City, which has been a big topic, is there that rent control and rent stabilization, and people think it lowers and it's better for lower income people, and maybe in some cases, but what's happening they have right now, which has been big in the media, is they have 100,000 vacant units of apartments, because if you rent them out, you get between $500 and $800, and you have to renovate them, which would cost you 50,000. You're better off leaving it empty. You don't have to pay the heat. Your insurance is less. There's no management. So that's the other side of that. So the only real way to lower rent and lower costs is to just bring on more supply, and it'll artificially just do it. It's worked everywhere. But
Right.
Miami's tough because it's also very congested in one certain area, but there's going to be sprawling, as you can see. And we're starting to look in other areas outside of Miami just to pick up some of that trend as well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And this, the whole rent stabilization topic is just, it is what it is. Like, in my opinion, it doesn't work for various reasons. One of them, like perfect example, what you had just mentioned, but it doesn't incentivize someone like you, Craig, to go in and pave the roads and fix the place up. If you can, increase the rent $8 or $10, whatever the percentage is, it just doesn't work. Right. Especially in Florida, typically when you're buying from a mom and pop, your first $50 to $75 of rent increase goes to the property tax increase.
Yes.
So, like, if there was rent
Insurance
control, it wouldn't
increase.
even insurance increase.
Yeah.
Right.
So everybody wants affordable housing, and we need it, but you could say you want affordable housing, but you can't raise the cost of insurance. You can't raise taxes. You can't raise labor costs and material costs and expect someone to go and build something or create something that's affordable. So you got to look at both sides. You got to look at the expense ledger, keep that down, and that'll help build something that's a little bit more affordable. Or you just saturate the market with supply. It's just supply and demand. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that's like, so I love this asset class. I guess anything, it could happen with anything. But my biggest concern in this asset class is that somehow, some way, the stars align in Washington, D.C., and they pass some national rent control in mobile home parks or whatever. And then the value of our stuff just, plummets. That's scary to me a little bit. What's your opinion on that?
So the other side to that coin is, if they do that, there'll be a lot less people buying them and less competition, and the barrier to enter the field will be harder. So no one can go just build or create a mobile home park. They're not going to do it. So if you want to be in that asset class where you don't actually own a mobile home, hey, it's harder to do. So your asset may go up a little bit. So that's unfortunate. And New York's a perfect example in the city. When you have so many vacant apartments and so rent stabilized, that when a landlord has another vacant unit that they could charge market rent, the people who are paying taxes and contributing to society, they're the ones who are now paying a higher rate. So if the government comes in and says, okay, I want 25% of your park to be rent stabilized, okay, well, our costs aren't going down. So then the other 75% have to, help offset that reduction in income, so we could pay the note, pay the taxes, and keep it a nice, safe place for people to live. So, unfortunately, if that happens, there's two sides of the coin, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. It's just definitely, if you buy, let's say you buy a park at a 6 cap this year or last year, and then they pass national rent control. Well, your property's not necessarily going to be worth that anymore. Because if you can only, depending on what the law would say, it just wouldn't be. And you understand that. And that's just something that, I just don't trust the government. I'm one of those guys. And like, whatever these guys can do, I mean, who knows what they'll come up with.
The other side of that is you got to realize the politicians all have to make money, right? And they're not doing it in their day job. So if they're invested in real estate, they may talk a good game. It's like they talk about, oh, we want to rent control and rate stabilize. And the average person's like, oh, that's a great idea. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'll go do the research and realize it actually hurts them. Because right now, there's no place for a lot of the people who are the working person making $20 an hour in New York. There's nowhere to live. But if you were to say, hey, you have 100,000 apartments, if you just get the market, let's get them on there. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for people who are working, who are good people trying to contribute, a nice place for them to live. And, it gets money flowing in the economy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So what do you see, guys? What's the future for you all? What's 2024 looking like?
Well, I think right now we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're always looking for deals. We're looking for to a bit larger deals than we currently have. But that's what we're just doing. We're just out there looking for deals. We're improving our current assets, trying to increase, cash flow, and waiting to see how things just transact over the next few months.
Yeah. Do you think we'll see any opportunities come out of people that are, I guess, in distress in some way, shape, or form?
I think there will be some people that will start to trickle out that are in distress. The question is there so much money on the sideline right now that are waiting for that opportunity that, it may drop 5-8%, drop 12 to 15%. That's only time will tell.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right, because like that's exactly what would happen. Because if someone told me today, hey, Derek, I got a freaking 150 space park. It's 85 cents on the dollar. Do you want? I'm like, yeah, I want it. And then you hear about it, and you're like, dude, I'll pay 87 cents on the dollar. And then somebody else hears about it, dude, I'll pay 91 cents on the dollar for that. And then before you know it, we're back at square one, right?
Yeah. Because people are buying deals and we're looking at them, and you and I spoke about this. They're losing money day one, and if you're in an area, in a market right now where rents are compressing, what's your goal to get profit? And if you're a syndicator, you have preps that you got to provide your investors, and they're going to want some upside as well. So,
right.
If those people can't refinance, not just mobile homes, but apartments over time, or you see a lot of the commercial real estate or office and retail, when those loans come due, it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I'm always going through whenever I get these deals that you and I were talking about, that we get these beautiful 4 caps and these 4.5 caps that we see, like the only sense that I can make of it. Yeah. I mean, maybe someone has some 1031 money and they're just going to drop in and pay cash for it. Yeah, they could do that. The asset's in a great location. It's going to do well over 10 years for sure. That's one way. Or if you have a fund model and you're raising 50 million bucks and you've got, assets that are providing great cash flow, you can throw in these trophy type assets to kind of offset. And having that nice asset in your portfolio, the other ones sort of offset the returns there. But yeah, just buying it one out is just like, whatever. But I will say the deal that we looked at yesterday was the nicest, most meticulously taken care of mobile home park that I've ever been to from mom and pop. I mean, it was immaculate, right? And it's in a great location. It's a 5 cap. And so I'm like, man, I want this deal. Like, instead of bringing in investors, me and my two partners, we can probably just fund this one ourselves. I mean, I would just like to have this deal because over time, like it would just be a great deal to have. And so I could see something like some thought process happening like that on these 4 and 5 cap deals that are really nice.
Long term, and it's in a good area where you see growth, you're better off buying a deal there. That's why being out in the market and knowing the area and the environment gives you a lot more insight than just someone who's, randomly cold calling brokers or calling sellers or property owners to try to buy it. You know the feel of the market. If a trend's going to go up in the next 5-10 years, you know what? You might as well grab it. But again, these things aren't going to go down 40%. It's not going to happen, because if they went down 20%, you and I would be out there buying everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this, Craig. So the 4 cap deal that came across your email 2 days ago, I know you got one. I wasn't looking at your email, but I know you got one. Are you going to be mad in 5 years that you didn't buy at least one of those deals that came through?
If I could find something that's better in between, no.
Okay, good answer. Because I always think, like, when I was first looking for deals, people would be like, oh, yeah, well, 55 a pad. And this is in Orlando. I'm like, oh, you're fucking crazy, dude. I'm not paying that. Like, no one's paying that. And like that same deal today would be, closer to, 100,000 a pad, maybe even, there. And so I actually found this old list here. It was an old little pipeline list that I had of deals. And I'm like, oh my God, like this deal in Cocoa for 40 a pad. I'm like, dude, these guys wouldn't fire sale it for 80 now.
All those deals.
Yeah. And so I always go back to, will I be saying that again in the next 5 years? And it's possible.
It is possible. I remember, 2008, and the market just kind of stopped, and there was tons of deals all over the place. But you got to realize this is the first time in our lifetimes, and people who are much older than us, that are actually in a rising interest rate environment. No one really has experienced that, unless you're maybe 70 at this point.
Yeah.
To see what's going to happen and the results of what's going to hit. And it takes a long time for the interest rate increase to actually hit the market and for people to feel it. That's how we talk to people who have been in the business for a lot longer, with a lot of experience, not just in the not in the MH, but multifamily and all other aspects. And when I see people who are, very successful, owns tons of real estate, wealthier than you could expect. And I see those people are sitting on the sideline waiting, but I have all these newbies calling and paying, $100,000 a pad for Ohio. And like, you know what? It sounds a little frothy for us at this time.
Yeah.
So there has to be some correction at some point.
Yeah. And the people that you've talked to that are sitting on their hands, what are they saying that they're waiting for?
The correction. They're waiting for the interest rate hike to be priced in. They're waiting for the people who had a 5-year loan that were expecting to refinance and pull money out, now having to come to the table to get another financing, because they're not going to pull money out. They want to get the same deal they had prior. If you had 3%, 5-year interest only, and your rents were $1,000, and now, they're $950, and rates are 6.5. You may have to come to the table with money, and it's hard when you're a syndicator to say to your investors, we need money, and you're going to make less.
Yeah, for sure. It's not a conversation that I want to have at all.
No, you probably don't. And it just takes a long time for it to filter through. And, you got to be patient. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that I need to work on is patience. We want to have everything yesterday, but I think the patient person will win.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're entrepreneurs. I mean, yes. What's the patience is like?
Horrible.
Like we are very patient, but at the same time, we're like, we hate it, right? We want everything to happen now, like you said, yesterday. But you're right. We've been extremely patient. here in these last, 18 months or so, 20 months. And now we're starting to see some movement on some deals. We're like, okay, well, we can make sense of that. But it's just so interesting because it's always going back to like, will this deal be cheaper if this is still around next year, if it comes back next year? I'm like, no, it's not.
It's got to be, if it's a good deal and you're looking long term, it makes sense. That's great. I wouldn't buy something thinking you're going to flip it in 12 months to make money.
No,
I wouldn't do. But
no,
you're going to hold something for 5 years and you have a team in place and you know the market. I don't know the market, for example, in Michigan. I'm not going to go and randomly go invest right now in Michigan, but there's something in a market I'm familiar with. And I'm like, yeah, I could see the levers here. I know there's some businesses coming. People are moving, demographics getting younger. That's something that you put some money in and you hold on to it. But that's why we do more of the buy and hold versus the buy and try to, put some paint on it and then sell it to the next person who's going to put paint on it and sell it to the next person.
Right. Yeah, and that's the same. I always say that I'm a long-term hold guy, but if someone's going to come and offer me a 3.5 cap, yeah, sure, sign it up, man. Send me some non-refundable money, and we'll sign a contract, right?
Yeah, that's when it usually stops, with the non-refundable money.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, I think I tweeted something one time. I was like, I keep getting sent these 3.5 caps. I'd sign a contract today if someone, will offer me a 3.5 cap for this stuff, because it's like, $1.90 a pad or something.
Yes.
And I actually had a broker reach out and was like, "Hey, Derek, some knucklehead," and he's like, "Hey, Derek, I got buyers. They're still paying, three." I'm like, "Whatever. No, you don't, man. We'll sell it all. 10 million hard day one, for the portfolio, 5 million, maybe, whatever." Of course, nothing came of it.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good brokers, but one problem that we always run into when you have like a residential broker has a mobile home park listing, and they don't know how to market it, and they're like, "Well, the rents are 1,100." I'm like, "Well, what's lot rent?" "No, it's 1,100." I'm like, "You're not going to get financing on 1,100 because they're renting out the home."
Nope.
And they tell the seller they're going to get, "Oh, it's 1,100 times 50 at a 5 cap," and then the seller has a huge number in his head, and it's just false.
Yeah.
And we've run into that a lot of times. So,
yeah.
And they're doing a disservice to the seller because they just don't understand what they're selling.
Yeah. And they literally essentially ruin that guy's ability to sell for however long, because they don't know what they're doing. And so they're saying here, but I mean, I just ran this. So the guy, he sent me something on LinkedIn. He's like, "Derek, I got a park, it's 35 pads, and there's 20 acres for development," which I'm always like, dude, if you're pitching the extra acreage, like, whatever, man. And I told him, I'm like, dude, 100 a pad in this area, like, no, like, that's just not good. And he's like, "Oh, well, the rent, same thing. You just, like, similar to what you just said. Oh yeah, well, the rent's this." I'm like, whatever, man.
I just did one of those on LinkedIn this week as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think, people just, need to learn the game. I think the game is changing. And I think some of those deals with higher park owned home rents, there's some creative ways to kind of make some of those work if it's in a great location. But still, the bank is only going to value lot rent. So you have to still think about that, but you can still get creative with it. And if the deal is, hits the right kind of circumstance, if that makes sense.
That's why I know in a market, like, a certain area, I can go in here and I'm okay. That's a huge advantage of it, which you have, especially in the deal you looked at yesterday. In the area, knowing the market, it makes a big difference for someone like you versus someone coming from outside area.
Yeah. And I wish you could have seen this park, dude. They literally have like this tea room there. where the
Tea
laundry
room, the
is.
park.
They call it a tea room, and it's literally looks like my great grandmother's like back porch. It's like stuck in like the
Wow.
70s. Like it's like, the floral kind of like yeah. It was just really
The
fascinating.
residents love the tea room.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Craig, man, is there anything that you want to leave with our listeners for some of our, maybe new people in the business? Like what advice would you give them? And, hey, they've actually committed. They say, hey, I want to invest in mobile home parks. I'm not half-ass about this anymore. I want to get into this space. What would you tell that person to do?
Get in your car and go drive every mobile home park in the vicinity, which could be 100 miles, could be 50 miles, depending on where it is. I would drive through it. I would talk to people and talk to everybody you can. And I would also talk to the local municipalities and check the zoning as well. I'd also talk to multiple attorneys as well, not just rely on one. If you're doing it out of state, you kind of also want to rely on a local attorney, not an attorney in a different state.
Yeah.
Because they may not understand the laws that are there. So, but I think getting your, we call it up here, they have a lot of subways and trains. I say the 11 train, the number 11 train, which is your 2 feet. Start walking and you'll learn a lot. And once you start talking to these residents, they will tell you everything.
Everything you need to know. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love that you said going out and driving, because that's important just to understand what you're looking at, right? You start to understand it more. You say, oh, this park, this is the trailer park. This is a mobile home park. This is a manufactured housing community here. You learn the differences between those, and there's nothing like that. I think I heard a guy online say, oh, it's a waste. You're wasting your time driving parks. I'm like, you're an idiot, dude.
Yes. Every time you go to a park, we've been to parks that just talking to people, oh, come on in. And then you could just see what their unit looks like. Are they keeping it nice, or are they sloppy? Are there bugs everywhere? Or is it, we always say, is there a vacuum cleaner or a broom at least in the unit, which is a sign that these people are caring and taking care of it. And you just learn so much. And you follow up with the people, and you never know. Maybe they say, oh, they're trying to sell this, or this person's trying to sell it. And it's a long-term relationship game. You can't expect to buy your first park a week into saying I'm buying parks. Again, it took us years. So
yeah. Well, thanks, Craig. So if people want to reach out to you, or where can they find you?
They can call me in our office. It's 904-757-5000. The best way to reach us is to ask for me, and we're open to talking to anybody. You never know when you could find a deal together.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Craig, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And everyone, please like and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. Just hit the like button, dude. It's not that hard, man. Just hit like. Like we get almost 1,000 downloads. Like probably a good bit every week, and we just don't people don't just click the like, man. Come on.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Derek.